My name is Damon Williams. I am a technical solutions specialist for AMCON controls and building controls and solutions. I've been in the industry for about 20 plus years, primarily working with a lot of Honeywell controls, but I've had experience with a number of different control systems as well and integrating them all back into a Tritium Niagara front end. Today, we're going to be talking about the Honeywell C-Bus Clif controller. The importance of this controller is you have customers that feel that they're stuck with the old Honeywell C-Bus line, and they feel that the only folks that they could actually deal with at the time is the Honeywell branch office. This is not true anymore. With this controller here, you can actually tie directly into the Honeywell branch office proprietary C-Bus. This controller here, it resembles an old Eagle AX controller or the Cyper 50. The difference is there's no inputs and outputs on this controller, and there is only one Ethernet port. This controller has no downloading of software or anything that you would have to do to the controller. It is all pre-configured through your web browser. One of the things is to easily connect to it. You will basically connect to this USB port right here, and you will plug it into your laptop. Once you do that, the Clif controller itself will establish a virtual Ethernet connection on your computer, which would actually create a new Ethernet network. It automatically assigns your IP address to this Ethernet port. You cannot change the IP address or anything like that, either from the Clif controller or from your computer when you are using your USB cable. To find what that IP address is, you can just simply come to here and click on details. And here's your IP address. The IP address of the Clif controller is 192.168.255.241. When it assigns the IP address for you, it just incremented by 1. Another thing that you may want to do also is go to your building forms. Click here on Honeywell Webs, and you're going to go to the BNA Clif C-Bus folder here. This folder right here, the Clif C-Bus and BNA firmware, you want to make sure you download this folder right here. It has all firmware software for Honeywell's BNA system, and also firmware and documentation from Honeywell on the Clif controller as well. Okay, one of the things is didn't show you the IP address, so let me do that again. And here's the IP address of your computer right here. And like I said, it's 192.168.255.242, and the Clif controller is 241, which shows up right here as your DHCP server. Once you have your firmware and everything, you shouldn't have to use it, but you may run into some rare cases where some controllers may not come in, and you may have to do a firmware upgrade on those controllers. But if you do, you would have to have the CARE software. The BNA firmware software is basically a device that the branch office actually used to tie in the C-Bus to their EBI system or old legacy XBSI system. So there's 3 versions of that device, and you may have to upgrade the firmware with that, and all of that is done through Serial Shell. So once you have your connection to your Clif controller, you're gonna just simply type in your IP address in any web browser, and it's gonna bring you to a login page. When you initially log into this system, there is no password. The first thing it's gonna force you to do is actually create a password. So you would be where it says password, whatever you type in is going to be the password that you are going to be creating at that time. If you created a password, or if there's a password in there already and you cannot get into the system, You can do a factory reset from right here, and it will reset it back to default. When you first log in, it kind of gives you a quick overview of how the system is set up. The only part of the configuration that you will pretty much be touching once you go into configuration is basically setting what the IP address is for the physical Ethernet port that is on the controller itself. Once you give it that IP address, you're good to connect it to a Cypher 50, a Jace 8000, or directly to the supervisor. Your Cypher 50 actually come pre-licensed with the Centraline Honeywell C-Bus driver. Right now, I'm trying to get clarification on the Jace 8000 and the supervisor. I was told that those licenses should come standard for your web supervisor and the web's Jace 8000, or you may have to purchase it. So I got to get clarification on that, and I can update everybody once I get clarification on that. So we're going to be working with a physical C-bus, which is actually going to connect to the RS-485 port on the controller itself. The controller can actually do C-bus over LAN, and what C-bus over LAN is that the controllers were set up as LAN, and they was pulled into an ILAN 600 router to make it Ethernet, and then Honeywell goes into their C-bus configuration and set that up, which they are calling a virtual C-bus. Once you've made all of your changes IP-wise, subnet mask, if you're putting it on a company's network, you may want to make sure you put in their default gateway as well. You would save your configurations. Once you have done that, then that's the only setup that you need for that controller itself. So the next part that we have is configuring the system in the web station on your Cypher 50, Jace, or supervisor. So just like any other system, you would actually have to set up an actual network. It's no different than setting up a BACnet network, a LAN network, Modbus network, or any third-party networks that you may have out there. To get to it in your palette, you're actually going to be looking for the Centraline drivers. Basically type in CL, and here's the C-bus driver right here. Once you have your drivers in your palette, you're just basically going to grab the C-bus network, and then you're going to drag it onto drivers here and add your network. It's just like LAN, you can actually add more networks as you add more Clif controllers out there. Once you have your network in, you want to right-click your driver, then you want to go to Views, and then you're going to go to AX Property Sheet. Under your AX Property Sheet, you're going to look for BNA IP address, and there you want to put in the IP address that you assigned to the Clif controller itself. The port number you pretty much can leave as default, which the system operates on a 2499 port. If you are connecting to the Honeywell branch office BNAs, you may have to look at and see what that port number is that they have set up for it. The C-bus channel 1 configuration basically is where you set the baud rate. Most Honeywell controllers, the XL10 lines, everything was left at a default C-bus polling rate of 9600. If you find any that was running faster than that, tend to cause you issues on that network. So all the networks was pretty much left at 9600 baud. Once you have this set up and your network status is okay, just like any other network, you can double click on the C-bus network, and then you want to go here and then just do a discover. So right now I have 2 controllers that are attached to my demo system here. One of the things I want to make sure everybody understands is when you initially do your discover, of the controllers out there, whether if it's a XL50, XL100, a Honeywell Zone Manager, or the XL500 controller or XL800 controller. It will pick those controllers up as one device, but some of those controllers could have multiple air handling units or fan coil units. If you're using a zone manager, now you're looking at VAV controllers. So as you pull those devices in, they do come in as one device. So you have to pay attention of how many devices is actually on each one of those controllers, because you're gonna have to take in account of how many parts that you need in your system as well. So we're gonna go ahead and grab these two controllers here, and we're gonna add them to our database. At this time, the names that they have on there is actually the names that was created, that was in the CARE software. So it pulls everything in that way, the channel that it's on and the controller number. None of this stuff you have to change. Just leave it as is, and then basically just hit your OK button. Once you have it added there, you want to actually leave the system alone at this time. What this is doing is it's going out, grabbing any schedules, any parameters, alarms, all the text engineering units, or everything that is actually in that controller at that time. It's actually uploading all of that on its own. So give it about a minute or two before you actually touch or move on from here. If you do at this time try to go and discover any data parts, it will come back that it did not find anything. So you want to make sure right here where it says communicating status that it is actually finished and saying not saying loading any.
Hey, Demond.
Yes.
Back on the zone controllers, when you have VAVs under that, when you do a discover, does it come in with the descriptions of VAV1, VAV2, space temps, discharge temps? So
yes, yes, it will keep whatever name that Honeywell or however they programmed it in CARE, it will keep those exact same names. So you won't have to try to figure out what this part is or anything like that. So if they actually named it room temp, when we discover it, it actually will say room temp, set part, or anything like that.
And then I would imagine we'd probably want to create a points folder with VAV1 so that we could copy those points, put them in there to keep graphics all relativized.
Yes, so that's the only thing. So right now, as you can see, my communication status has gone to idle. That means that it has finished pulling in all the information, discovering everything from the controller. So when we go here to our data parts, and then we do a discover, it's basically just gonna discover all the parts in that controller. So like you said, that you will, if it's more than one air handling unit in there, so you will actually have to create separate folders for it if you want to relativize your graphics and things like that. Right now, as you can see, this controller right here was a controller that was donated to us from University of Houston. The way the system was set up is the building initials, what air handler it was, and then what the part name was. So as you can see, I have air handler 1, I have air handler 3, in here as well, and a bunch of other parts. So they even show some of the statuses of the controller itself, its startup status, shutdown status, and then if it's doing executing a stop or anything like that. So it does pull all of that information out as well. Most of the time I just basically sort by unit, create a new folder, and then go into here. It's easy to just go into there and then do it this way. You can discover the parts the other way and then try to copy them. But if you try to copy them, sometimes it'll actually just duplicate the punch in the controller. So at this point in time, just like any other Niagara parts that you're pulling into the system, either through a line controller, backnet controller, you can actually change the naming at this point in time on the controller and on the data point itself. And you can actually adjust the facets and everything too. Normally I just leave it the way it is to see what it is in the system. And so right now, this is everything that is actually in that controller from that air handling unit 1. It acts just like any tritium part that you pulled in. If a part has been overwritten in the controller, it does show up at the overwritten state. Also, with the temperatures themselves, depending on how they set up the alarms in the controller, it will actually display the alarms in the Niagara system as well. And at this point in time, I have these parts here. I can actually go in and instantly go to action and start overriding data parts in here. The good thing about this system, there is no lag. So as soon as I push the OK to tell this fan to go off, the unit actually does go off, so you don't have to worry about that. Anything of a lag, maybe up to a minute or something like that, when you have other third-party drivers that actually ties into the Honeywell C-Bus as well. So are the parts writable? Yes, they are. So if I need to change any set parts, anything, I can do it as simple as going to set or override, and then basically just changing it just like I do any other Niagara system. So like I say, once you bring it in, it acts no different than any other lawn system, backnet system, or anything like that. So one of the other cool features that they do have is if you actually click on the data point and then go to, they have two different views. You have the C-Bus data point view, which it does do initial polling for that point as well. Once it have pulled it in, then this loading time actually is a lot quicker. So this view right here, which is the C-Bus data point view, is basically emulating what you would actually see in the CARE software or their EBI system or their old XBS or XBSI system. Whereas if I wanted to override this, I would have to actually put it in a manual mode, and then you hit save, and then it overrides it that way. So as I say, are the parts writable like in CARE? Yes, they are writable just like if you're using the CARE software. If you go into the AX property sheet, one of the cool things is if you get into a point where you want to actually do a controller change out and none of the wires are labeled and you kind of want to find out what parts are on what terminals, if you go into the AX property sheet and right here under your proxy extension and then right here up under config, this is the right here where it says technical address, basically tells you where that part is. So this is basically controller 3, module 2, input number 1. That way you know exactly where those parts are. And I have done this where I've gone out to a job site to help a contractor. I've put one of these on their Honeywell C-Bus network, did a discover of all the parts, and I just came here to the technical address and then basically got that and just recreated the document for them. And they were able to find where all the parts were, and they was able to do the switch out without too many issues or having to tone out wires and spend a day and a half toning out wires and things like that. And as you see, it does have the priority array tables where you can see where stuff is overwritten and everything. Down here under schedules, Here is the schedule. This schedule actually is a exact representation of what's actually in that controller. And this is exactly how it looks in the EBI system or XBSI system as well. So you right click on it, you can create overrides. Schedules can be imported up to Niagara schedules and push and pull that way. It's a little cumbersome to be set up, or you can actually go in and delete these schedules and then basically just recreate them in the Niagara environment and let everything control that. So clicking on here on each individual ones, now I can see the overview. I can get to daily schedules, weekly schedules, yearly schedules, and then holiday schedules if there was any in there. The way Honeywell used to do it is they would create a day schedule and then assign that day schedule to a weekly schedule. And it's just like Niagara where you can actually push and pull your schedules as well. All system alarms go to a default class unless you create another class. Critical alarms is the same way. The non-critical alarms is the same. And then we get here to parameters. Parameters is basically just like your data points. You would have to discover. The only issue is at this point in time, it does not create what the actual names are. So this one would be kind of hard. You would have to basically kind of search around for different parameters. And this is basically so you can get to where their PID tuning and things like that are. So that, like I said, that's the only thing you would have to kind of play around with to find out where that information is. One of the things also is on the Clif controller itself, it does still have your two standard RS-485 network 1 and network 2. The Clif controller only utilizes the RS-485 port 1. It does not utilize port 2. When you go into the configuration or even the CBus network here, it does talk about the second bus, but like I say, the second bus isn't actually used at this time, which is this channel here, which is actually disabled.
I was just going to say, looking at this, it's almost kind of a plug and play for the most part.
Yeah, it's pretty much plug and play. Like I say, it's basically setting the Clif controller up itself. Takes you no more than 10 minutes. When you plug it into their the bus network, you can put it at the beginning, you can put it at the end. If you do either one of them, you have to make sure you put a 120 ohm resistor on it. But Honeywell's recommendation is basically putting it in the middle of the network or anywhere on the network. And then once you get it on the network, your transmit and receive light would automatically pick up. Once those start communicating, then the Clif controller is ready to go. And when you go into any web supervisor, JACE 8000 or the Cyper 50, you just drop that driver in there and then basically do your minimum configuration, and that's basically just looking at the IP address. And once they establish that communication, then you're up and going in less than 5 minutes. Controller wise, Honeywell recommendation is only up to 32 devices on this on one Clif bus network is all that they want you to pretty much put on there. Anything more than that, then you'll be looking at using another Clif device as well.
And when that, on that device count, does that count for like the zone controller with say 10 VAVs off of it? Would the zone
Yes.
controller count as one?
So the zone, no, the zone controllers won't count against your devices. Is basically the main device itself. So if you had a zone manager on there and you had 30 VAV boxes under there, it's only going to look at the zone manager and count that zone manager as one device. The same thing for the XL500 that has the multiple cord slots and you can just keep adding housing onto it. It's only going to count that one CPU out of that device as one device, but I could have up to 5 different air handling units on there. So one of the things also is you can put this device on the Honeywell network, why the Honeywell EBI or the older XBSI network is still online, and you can actually build your system at the same time so you don't interrupt or take the customer offline or anything like that. So that is one good thing and a plus with this integration is you don't interrupt their existing system until you know that you're done, finished building graphics, getting alarms set up, massage, however you need the system to be. Once that happens, you can bring your customer in, let them look at the system, and then if everybody's in agreement with that, that you are finished with setting that system up, then you can go in and take the EBI system offline. This device right here, I'm not recommending it as a replace all type deal. Is basically one of those deals that if you have a customer that wants to get rid of a proprietary front end, but they don't have the money to basically replace an entire system, this is a way that you actually can get in with those customers, give them an open front end, and get the system up and running for them. And then as devices start failing, then you can just replace that device with a newer backnet controller or anything like that. So that is the good thing, and that's pretty much the way that I'm marketing using this system. Like I say, once you get your controllers and everything in here, just remember the controllers themselves is actually one device, but you need to take an account of how many air handling units or fan core units, VAV boxes is up underneath each one of those devices, and you want to make sure that you add controllers accordingly to your Cyper 50 or to your JACE 8000 or to the supervisor themselves. Another little deal is if you use the Clif controller, license-wise, you're only limited up to 50 devices. JACE 8000, you're limited up to 200 devices. So just make sure that you take an account for which controller that you're actually going to use, depending on based on how many data points that you